it's clearly not really any different than what you've always been doing, right? It's under the same vein of like actually caring about people and wanting to make life better for everybody. And so, what is that? Where did that come from? You must have some pretty amazing parents, right? But where do you think that fire comes from?
I think I've just always really identified with like the little guy and like, wanted to defend. And I've always been like a defender of like my friends. Like growing up for me, I was like really different. I wasn't, didn't necessarily like identify with the white kids at my school or the black kids at my school. I was a mixed kid.
Right.
And like in the 80s, I was like the mixed kid at my school. So I was always trying to like understand how I could fit into situations. And when I would see kids that didn't, I just really like would gravitate towards them and want to help them.
Caroline Phillips is the founder of the National Cannabis Policy Summit, the National Cannabis Festival, and High Street PR. Born in London to parents David and Lily, Caroline moved to D.C. when she was 4 years old and has been here ever since. Caroline spent her life advocating and working for change at a relentless pace. While a student at Georgetown University, she was the events and communications director and coordinated all the events and logistics at the BMW Center. Straight out of Georgetown and Howard University, she hit the ground running at Reading is Fundamental as a community outreach manager, and then made her way to the DC Public Education Fund, where she managed a lot of moving parts, including the annual gala at the Kennedy Center. Caroline then logged over 4 years at Human Rights First, once again organizing and amplifying the mission of the organization through event planning and management. In April of 2016 is when Caroline hosted the very first National Cannabis Festival and made literal history. Nobody had ever done this before. There was no blueprint. In its 4th year, the festival continues to grow, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Determined and full of humble spirit, Caroline is a natural leader who truly cares about the work she is doing. Her focus is on community and equality, and she truly cares about every single person who's on this journey with her. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the one and only, the fabulous Caroline Phillips.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting. I wasn't sure if I should clap. I was like, maybe I should, but then clapping for myself feels wrong, but thank you.
Hey, man, I'll clap for you anytime.
I'll clap for you.
There you go. There you go. So what's up, man?
We are, 2.5 weeks off the festival now. So I've started to kind of become a human again. I was like in festival troll mode for about 4.5 months. But I'm starting to like get back to like regular sleep schedules and eating schedules and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, I don't think people fully understand like how much work actually goes into these festivals and like how many months in advance, I mean, pretty much you're probably going to start working on the next one like next week. I would imagine.
We start again in July because we spend 2 months closing out. So paying our bills, thanking people, making sure that if there are any issues, those are addressed, getting feedback from people. And then we start all over again in July.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So how many people are on the NCF team?
So we have a team of about 3 people who are full-time, including me. And then we have about 6 more people that help on nights and weekends. And this is the first year that we've had any full-time people. Before this year, it was me full-time, and then everybody nights and weekends. So it's been really exciting to be able to like bring a couple of people on to help with the constant churn all year round.
For sure. I mean, I can definitely see a difference in you like this year compared to previous years. You seemed, a little bit less stressed going into the event this year than other years. I think, you've kind of gotten this formula down, right? I mean,
well, I think I've also figured out like when and who to ask for help when I need it, like being able to make a Mayday call to you and being like, Molly,
hey,
I need you to gather your troops. We have like a lot of ground to cover for like directional signage, and we don't have a lot of time to get it done. So it's like really cool to be able to like reach out to friends and like community partners and like get that extra push across the finish line. This year was great in April. I can't lie, like leading up to April, I was probably more stressed than I've ever been. And then like there was just like a clearing of the clouds, and
right.
It's like it's going to happen no matter what. So here goes.
Well, it's super impressive, I got to tell you. And I mean, the festival has grown nonstop. I mean, how many people were there year one?
Year one, 2016, we had 5,000 people.
And then this year?
This year we had 20,000 people with like everybody in the gates, and it was pretty wild.
I mean,
but
that's insane. That's incredible growth for like such a homegrown and like only. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at this point is actually the only independently owned and operated festival in DC, right?
I think so. I mean, I think that there are probably some other small festivals too,
Sure.
but probably of its size, the only independently owned and run one right now, which is exciting. It makes it a challenge, but it's exciting. It's nice to be able to like really touch the project that you're working on and know it like front to back, and that also makes it scary. But yeah, we've grown 4 times our original size in 4 years, and it has been rewarding, but also a lot of hard work. I think after this one, I realized I've been like running on adrenaline for 4 years straight because it's like a constant, like, okay, here we go again, jump right back in.
Right.
But
Yeah, I mean, the amount of work that takes, So I mean, I have to ask, I heard you tell this story, at the Cannabis Story Slam that that where you got the inspiration from this and that you had this crazy idea and you put the Kickstarter together. But what the thing that I've always been really impressed is like it takes a lot of guts to throw a cannabis festival on federal property or is it federal or is it just government owned?
no, it's federal land that has been leased back by Washington, D.C. I don't, worry myself too much about the intricate details. I'm like,
Right.
as long as everyone's cool, like,
Right.
okay.
Right.
So
I mean, that's so incredible because it's one thing to take these like underground or undercover risks. It's another thing to like put yourself all the way out there. I mean, throwing a festival is a huge risk. Like any festival is a huge, huge risk, right?
Right.
Never mind a weed festival, right?
Right.
Especially in these days of like, they're kicking down doors of dispensaries who have been in business for a long time and like raiding them. And so like, what's to stop, like any crazy thing happening, but like there you are, like forging ahead, doing it the right way, getting the permissions and the boxes checked and getting the right permits and doing everything like, above board and with permission and support, I would hope, from the city. And I just think that takes like such incredible amounts of chutzpah, if you will. I mean, I'm just blown away by
Well,
it. I
thank
mean,
you.
so what is it that gets you through those? Like, I'm sure you have moments where you just like laying in bed with your eyes wide open and like, what how do you deal with those kind of things? What's your
I mean, I think I'm still learning how to deal with those things. It's pretty heavy stuff sometimes with,
for sure.
a lot of expectation of all of your exhibitors, all of the people traveling. Like occasionally I'll imagine people flying in and like, oh no, what if this happens or this happens? I don't want to disappoint these people who've like created a whole trip around the festival. All of our advocacy partners, we don't want to do anything to like embarrass them.
Right.
The neighborhood, we don't want to do anything to piss off the neighborhood. We don't want to embarrass or upset the police or the mayor.
Right.
So at times it can be like really overwhelming, but I think what gets me through is like really, it's actually like the little stories. There are a couple of our exhibitors who've been with us since like year one now.
Mm-hmm.
And like, a little email every now and again, as leading up to the festival, it's like, hey, I was on Facebook and I saw a memory of like some of the merch that I brought to your first festival. And I just like can't believe how much my business has grown and how much your festival has grown. And, I just want to say, we're so excited for you and for each other. So it's like that kind of stuff that gets me excited. And I think it helps get through some of the kind of more stressful stuff. And that's also, I think, what's unique about the cannabis community. There's just so much gratefulness from our audience,
right,
and from our exhibitors and sponsors that there is an opportunity for them to like come together. And I think that's just something really different. I hope that general sentiment stays around for a while, but I think that has to do with, we're still right at the end of prohibition, and just the idea that you can come together and talk about these things and celebrate them is really new to a lot of people.
For sure. And not only that, but like you have the Canna Tank. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So Canna Tank is something we started in year one at the festival. It is an entrepreneur contest, sort of like the Shark Tank show on TV. We wanted to create a contest with a relatively low bar for entry because I'm like not the most technologically savvy person. I always have an old cracked cell phone. If someone required me to like record a video and do a bunch of like tech heavy stuff to enter a contest, I wouldn't be able to do it because I just don't know how. But I know there are other people who can't do it because they can't afford the equipment.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure that it was like an easy entry contest. And I really do think that the crux of like any good business person and any good business is, can you articulate your idea in a way that appeals to other people?
For
So
sure.
it's like 500 word limit. Basically, you have a paragraph to convince us that this is like a worthwhile idea. People have the option to send in additional information, but that's not necessarily going to be weighted any heavier than just getting a paragraph.
Right.
But yeah, so for the past 4 years now, we have brought 4 finalists, 5 this year because there were so many good applications together at the festival, where we've had business owners from DC and beyond run a final round of the competition. We narrow down usually from between 30 and 50 applicants to a final 4. They have a couple of minutes to do their elevator pitch. It's like 3 to 4 minutes. They get
Nice.
asked questions by the judges, the audience votes by clapping. And then at the end of it, somebody gets $1,000 and they can use that. I know it's not a lot of money, but like, again, for like a startup business, that can help you start your website,
can
buy
help
some
a
business
lot.
cards, get some flyers.
Right.
And that's kind of the spirit here.
That's super cool. I think it's it just really like kind of summarizes your spirit that like you're just always giving back, right? Like even like out of high school or out of, college, and everything you've done has always been in the spirit of, and I don't even know if like giving back is the right word, but just like elevating your community, like taking care of people, like creating policies, like really like organizing these events to bring people together to have these important conversations. So, it's clearly not really any different than what you've always been doing, right? It's under the same vein of like actually caring about people and wanting to make life better for everybody. And so, what is that? Where did that come from? You must have some pretty amazing parents, right? But where do you think that fire comes from?
I think I've just always really identified with like the little guy and like, wanted to defend. And I've always been like a defender of like my friends. Sorry. I don't know why this has me so upset, but like growing up for me, I was like really different. I wasn't, didn't necessarily like identify with the white kids at my school or the black kids at my school. I was a mixed kid. And
Right.
like in the 80s, I was like the mixed kid at my school. So I was always trying to like understand how I could fit into situations. And when I would see kids that didn't, I just really like would gravitate towards them and want to
Yeah.
help them fit. And I think for me, working with DC public schools, my mom was a school teacher in DC in the late 80s.
Mm.
And she was teaching at 15th and East Capitol.
I wish I did
Which
for you. I'm
is
so sorry.
2 blocks from where my condo is. My condo is like right by Stadium Armory.
Yeah.
So she started teaching down there. And I remember I was very fortunate. My parents were working, they had good jobs. My mom was a teacher. So I got to go to like a private school in DC. And I just remember I was about 9 years old and she was asking me if like any kids at school had extra clothes. And I was like, huh? Like, oh, you're doing like some kind of a clothing drive. Cool. And it ended up being all of these trash bags of clothes in our basement. And I couldn't understand why. And it turns out like not one, but like a bunch of the kids at the elementary school that she was teaching at, which was Holy Redeemer Catholic School, it was winter and like their feet would go on the front of the shoes, but they were stepping on the back of the shoes because their feet were too big. And there were just some parents, for whom buying a sweater or a coat, that was the priority. Like shoes, okay, if you have socks on, we can make that work. You'll be in the building soon.
Right.
But, for my mom, that was not acceptable. And then like when I started to understand that, I was like, what do you mean they don't have shoes that fit them? Like, what does that mean?
Right.
I was like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
So I would go down there to school with her every now and again. And I had this sense that I was getting something that these kids weren't.
Right.
Like, I remember my mom would walk me around and introduce me to the other teachers, and she'd just be like beaming with pride and talking about all of like, Caroline's like, doing this and that. And she plays soccer. And I just like, I had this feeling that I had access to things that these kids didn't. And I knew I did because I remember walking from the school back to the metro and just being like, this is not like where my mom and I live. So I think for me, it really started there. And then coming out of school, I wanted to get involved with like education in our city. My mom was a teacher. I came in at a weird time for DC public schools. We were switching from Michelle Rhee to Kaya Henderson. So like priorities were really changing in our school system. But I wanted to like contribute to those efforts. And same with reading is fundamental. Just like the idea that there are kids without access to books, that's nuts.
Yeah.
Like, if you can't read, you can't be on the internet even. Like you can't read Twitter. So like the idea that there are kids who have never held a physical copy of a book, like that really touched me. And with Human Rights First in Georgetown, I got to really understand a lot of the more like international struggles and how similar they are. You know, like a family struggling in Afghanistan, at the core of their issue, like hunger, need for basic social services, that's actually something that's also happening in our city now.
Right here.
Hunger, need for basic social services. So that was really interesting to me, and just seeing how other countries like dealt with that and understanding how the United States could help or not help with those things. And I think that's sort of the same thing that drew me to cannabis. Um, I have been a cannabis smoker for a good amount of my life. And when Initiative 71 passed in DC, I remember being really excited at first to see all of these big events coming to the city. I was like, this is really cool. Like, I'm going to go to all these weed events. I'm going to meet weed people. It's just going to be this whole amazing thing. And somehow, like through a whole series of connections, I ended up being asked to produce what ended up being the first cannabis conference in DC, which happened to be falling the weekend after Initiative 71 passed.
Right.
So it ended up being a huge event. And it wasn't really until right after the event, or probably the morning of the second day, but then immediately after the event, that I was really struck by something. And that something was the tickets to the event had been $700. I'm thinking about the number of people that came through the doors and all of the nonprofit groups that I encouraged to speak for free, and all of the people that couldn't get in that room because they didn't have $700, but were like milling around the lobby of the hotel trying to just like understand what was going on. And then who was actually in the room, which was nobody that looked like anybody that like I grew up with, and like nobody that, there were just not many women in the room. There weren't many like people of color. It just didn't look like our city. So I left that conference and I was super bothered, and I probably went home and I probably smoked some weed and thought about it. And it became like this thing that I couldn't let go of, which is I could do this in a way that made it more accessible.
Right.
You know, I could do this in a way that was more thoughtful and gave something back to the nonprofit groups, because the idea that we have these groups going around and speaking for free at events, but then they're not necessarily getting, you know, the opportunity to exhibit. They're not necessarily getting tickets for all of their staff to attend.
Right.
They're not getting stage time, like that kind of stuff.
Which there's always room for. Like maybe
Yeah.
not stage time, like that can be a little bit more like valuable of a commodity, right? But like you could always comp some tickets. You can always have a fuller room. Like you can always make room for more people. So yeah, to leave those things on the table is really short-sighted and narrow.
Well, and you know, DC is like a really different city for a lot of reasons, especially when it comes to cannabis. But I was living at the time, like my condo is a couple of blocks from the DC jail. So I was like, you know, I'm pretty sure there are people in there locked up for cannabis, or maybe that was their first touch with the law and the beginning of like a cycle of touches with the law and incarceration. So I think that's something people in our city are super aware of. And because of my nonprofit background, I knew that we'd had a lot of groups locally and nationally who'd been working for a really long time and working really hard with very few resources, and a lot of people not taking them very seriously to push this issue forward. So I knew that in DC, our celebration of cannabis had to be different. And then again, because we're in DC, I knew that we actually have the right city and the right population to make this festival about more than consumption, but about, you know, really rallying together. Like just by showing up, you're standing with this group of now 20,000 people to like wave at the Capitol and say, you know, it's time to change.
We're here. We're not afraid.
Yeah.
Right.
So
that's pretty amazing stuff, man. So where do you see the festival going? Like, what is your ultimate goal? Is this like you know, 20 years from now, are we going to be like hanging out at NCF with like 200,000 people, like world tour? Like what are we doing?
I mean, I'm grateful for each year. Like whenever people ask me for like a 5-year plan, I like kind of freak out, because it's, if anyone thinks that there's like a whole lot of ego involved in this for me or my team, like no, we work scared and we work hard, and it's because we're the super little guy in this.
Totally. Well,
we have a big event now, but
right. Well, I would say anybody who's met you or your team or dealt with either one of you recognizes that immediately, right? There's no confusion as to like I mean, you just like everyone on your team is so sweet.
They're really brave. They're hard workers,
and
and they don't ask for any like. We talk about my team, and we're not really naming names because everybody's like, we are a team, and that's just we're all in those obnoxious green shirts. They were new this year with green.
Right.
Last year it was like red, but we're all in the same staff shirt. We're all gonna pick up trash. We're all gonna go and
totally
deal with an issue if there is one, because there is no like secret magical production company behind all of this.
For sure, for sure. So do you think at any point, like, would you be open to getting bigger sponsors and like bigger companies, or are you really committed to like sticking with like really local, really homegrown, grassroots kind of stuff?
I think it really depends what our community wants. I am not against bigger national sponsors necessarily. I think it's really important that the balance of our exhibitors, the heavy balance, remains very local and remains small business, simply because if you've walked through our exhibitor village, it's like vibrant and exciting because of the variety of businesses there.
Totally.
And if we find ourselves in a position where, it's like we take on these like 6 huge sponsors that give us all of the money we need, it's just not going to be that interesting.
It's not going to be the same.
And also, the festival wasn't started or funded by big companies, so I don't feel a whole lot of allegiance to them. It's not that I don't want them there, but like I feel a lot of allegiance to the small businesses for whom pulling together that exhibitor fee is something that they have saved up for since, July.
For sure.
Or who have to pay in 18 installments because that's just like what it is right now.
Yeah.
And because I'm still that way, like, I feel more comfortable in the room with like the people in our community than I do when I find myself at like a conference trying to, talk to the big companies. I don't really know what to say to them.
Right.
But, if we want to grow the event, we need to make sure that we can afford to do that. It's not an inexpensive thing to do.
For sure.
At the same time, I think it's important that we don't grow the event so fast that we're relying on big business like money.
Right.
And I think that's very easy to do when you're scaling up an event and you start getting excited about the number of people that you can get there. So I think if we're like really deliberate and scale up slowly, hopefully, our partners here grow with us and they become the big sponsors. They become the big names regionally. I think overall for the festival, though, one of my favorite things that happened this year was 420 Week. You were there for some of the programs. And like, the Story Slam was like the best thing that I think I've like ever done. Sorry, that is my humble brag moment, because like produced events, but that was like the most special thing that I think I've ever seen. And I didn't really have to do anything. It was like Songbird gave us a room. You all brought stories, and I just got to sit there grinning from ear to ear.
You would look like a little kid.
I was
just,
loud
like, so happy, and you're giggling.
I was breaking your eardrums loud clapping.
That's right. I forgot about your like sonic boom.
All of the recordings of this event, you can like hear me like cackling and loud clapping like someone's mom at the front of the room, like, wah.
It's really impressive. That could be like, you should like Uber yourself out, or like there's got to be some like, Task Rabbit or something.
It's all
like,
about the hollow in the palm.
Yeah.
But we were at City Winery, which was really cool, and it was like this beautiful. The setup was so beautiful. That was interesting and it was cool. But like at that event, we talked about criminal justice and our city and how it was really nice that we were all sipping wine and talking about cannabis. There's still people in jail for this.
Right.
The next day we were at Loyalty Bookstore with Tony Lewis Jr., who was talking about mass incarceration and the side casualties of that being families, because it's not just about the people that get locked up.
Right.
And he's not like a cannabis legalization advocate, but he does now, in the context of his life, see that, if we're suddenly going to be giving people billions of dollars for cannabis while other people are locked up for cannabis, this is an example of the problems with our mass incarceration system. Like, there's something not right here. On Sunday, we ended up at DC Brow doing a Hemp and Hops event. These were all cool events to me because 3 years ago, there's no way we could have walked into most of these spaces. On Monday, that was Songbird. So that was a story slam where I like learned stories about people that I just had like no idea about, and laughed. I cried. Shocker. I clapped a lot. And then on Tuesday, we went to Busboys and Poets, the new location in Anacostia, and we had this amazing community forum. It was Linda Green from Anacostia Organics, her general manager, Brandy, Shanita from Minority Cannabis Business Association, and they talked about the current law in Washington, D.C., the medical cannabis program, and then specifically what people need to be doing and thinking about to find jobs in the cannabis industry, and then beyond jobs to own businesses in the industry.
Absolutely. It's important to prepare people
Yeah.
for that so they understand like what it's going to take. On that note, what do you think about this bill that the mayor has put forth?
I mean, it's a bill right now, so I think that's interesting. I was happy to see the community reinvestment provisions that like money from this needs to go to the communities most hard hit.
And specifically with housing, which
Right.
you know,
Right.
I mean, I'll say this because you don't need to. I think the mayor should have more of a focus on that right now. But hey, whatever. As long as there's like money going towards that, like
Right.
if we're gonna solve that problem, then that's great. I mean, the soda tax is what pays for the kids' breakfast programs in the public schools. So why can't we pay for more public housing, right? Like,
We will definitely see. I'm hoping that when the DC council members get to chime in and really, get down to the details on this, that they will have hopefully heard from the public. So, like, everybody, write to your council members, show up at the meetings. There will be hearings coming up, and tell them exactly what you think needs to be in this. The thing that I didn't see, I'm glad about the community reinvestment. I'm glad about the 60% of the business owners need to be from DC or live in DC. The thing that I didn't see, though, was really any equity provisions. Because it's great to reinvest dollars into communities that have been struck hard by the war on drugs. But what would be more helpful would be allowing those people first access to the business licenses.
absolutely.
Because, we can keep sending money to like communities, or we can like give those communities businesses to generate their own cash. And I
Right,
think
it's
that's
like
more important.
teach a man to fish, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Kind of a thing for sure. But not even that, because it's not just teaching people, it's like actually
Right.
carving out space because there's just so much
I'm optimistic, though.
inequality,
Like,
right?
I do think that the activists in our city will make sure that DC Council knows that this is important. I don't think the mayor is totally tone deaf to that at all. I just think that it needs to be said out loud. And then hopefully in the next year, we will have an amazing, mostly local recreational market.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see like what happens in the next year and how that impacts the festival and like what all that means, because I can only imagine it'll impact it in a positive way, not in a negative way.
Of course, I go straight to logistics. So for the first time, I went to my first big cannabis event this year, which is funny, but I went to the Emerald Cup in December. And they're one of the first festivals in California that's been allowed recreational sales on site. And the like logistical changes that would have to happen, we can do it. It's pretty wild. There's like an entire section of that festival grounds like locked down and just dedicated to cannabis storage, deposits, and withdrawals from like where people have to keep their cannabis.
Holy crap.
A whole different set of security, like a whole different
Right.
way of having to move money on and off like public festival grounds.
Right.
So I, of course, immediately jumped to that in my head, but I'm excited for our local companies, for our DC dispensaries who've, put out so much money and so much effort just to kind of get this medical cannabis program off the ground.
Totally.
To be able to potentially sell cannabis on site to patients and recreational customers would be great. And then to see other small business owners who've been kind of like banging on the door of this industry for the past couple of years be allowed in, that would be just phenomenal. So it would
For
be
sure.
a good game changer.
It'll change some things, but in a good way for sure. Well,
Yeah.
I can say because I've been an exhibitor, since day one, and I think I'm finally figuring it out. I was like, it took me 4 years, but I think I'm getting there now. But it's just helped us tremendously. It's always just cool to be a part of it, and I'm always happy to help in any way that I can. But just to witness the actual growth of the festival and like what's happened, and just knowing you, a little bit in the beginning and knowing you more and more, it's just like really cool to see how much you've evolved, into this just like sturdy, strong, pioneer. I mean, you've always been that, but I feel like the
still cry a
NCF
lot.
has really, I mean, whatever, we all cry a lot, you know what I mean? So, but like, it's really just like, You know, it's like when you're growing weed and you put a fan on it, so you stress it out, right? You stress it out so that it forms like stronger root networks, and so that like it can handle, because that's what happens in outdoors. You know,
Right.
the wind hits it and it blows it, but that actually strengthens the plant. So you always want to kind of push it a little bit and mess with it a little bit so that it really stands its grounds. And I feel like there's a pretty solid analogy there with you, because you've always known what you were doing. You've always like grown towards the sunshine and produced this amazing result. But now I think after 4 years of really being knocked around by the wind a bit, and all the other challenges that we could probably spend hours talking about, right?
Yes.
And it's only made you better, right? And it's only made those adversaries, really understand exactly who the fuck you are, and how that you're not playing, but you're also really humble, and you're also very nice, and you're very kind. You do a much better job of that than I ever could. We all know that, right? So, it's such a really big deal. So how do you so what are you gonna do next? And I don't mean like after Cannabis Festival, like whatever. I'm talking about like what do you do in the next 30 days?
Um,
How are you gonna offset like this madness of the last 10 months?
well, I'm going right back to work. We are now working on production for the Women Grow Leadership Summit in June,
Ah,
which I should talk to you about.
totally.
It's interesting. In the past 3 years, the first 3 years of the festival, at least after the festival, I just like thought that the right thing to do would be to like take this kind of like couple of week break, partially because I really needed to, and partially because I was like, oh, that's obviously what you should do after you've really stressed yourself out working. And I would find that I'd enter this like weird kind of like mood dip. And I think it was just from going like 100 miles an hour
To
to like
zero.
5 miles an hour. And my body was, and brain was like, oh,
What's
wait a
happening?
second. And it's, not like it was zero. I was still doing closeout, but I didn't have necessarily my next project lined up.
Right.
So that's not how it works, folks. You don't put on a big cannabis festival and suddenly everyone's throwing business at you. You still have to get out there and pitch and get new business. This year, though, I'm very fortunate to have a project, in June. So I am a little tired. I'm going to take a break after the Women Grow Leadership Summit. I'm going to take the festival team on a retreat. We do that once a year now. Because again, a lot of the people on our team volunteer.
Right.
A lot of them work nights and weekends. So the idea that we can all just go away for a weekend and hang out is really great. And hopefully I'll get away on a vacation that is the kind of vacation where my cell phone won't work. And I can
Right.
like read books.
Yeah.
We'll see though.
I'm like, take me with you.
I know. I'm
right?
like, I just need to get out of here. In a good way though.
No, I can dig it. I can dig it. So what would you suggest, to people who are listening, right, or are thinking about becoming more active in the industry or whatever, what would you suggest people do? Like, are there some resources locally that they can get involved in, like Women Grow and things like that? How can people reach you as if they want to volunteer or if they have something they want to bring to the festival or the movement? What's your advice for young, cannabis activists and entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs, right?
Definitely check out some of the networking events in the city. There's Women Grow. There's a new group called Canna Gather that has started to be in town. A lot of our advocacy partners have really terrific events, and if it's a fundraiser, that's like a double bonus. It's like pay a $20 entry fee, and you've gotten to donate to a great group and meet the people who are actually like making the changes happen. There are some different lobby days coming up. Like I know that the National Cannabis Industry Association has lobby days coming up, and I believe Normal does as well this fall. So you can check out all of those events online at the different organization pages, normal.org, drugpolicy.org. There are many others. Definitely go to the festival website, click our advocacy link, and you can see our partners. I would encourage you to research those groups. Then I think that my advice to someone who has a business idea already is, write it down. Like, write out how you're going to do it. If you don't know how to write a business plan, that's fine. Write out how you're going to do it. That's a business plan.
Mm-hmm.
You can get someone to help you formalize it. You don't necessarily, if you're really passionate about your idea, need to reach out and partner with 500 people. You can incubate your idea, like work on it quietly and slowly. It took me 1.5 years to get the first festival off the ground.
Right.
And most of that work was done by myself on my couch in my 1-bedroom condo.
Totally.
and really then just take stock of the resources around you. I don't necessarily have stranger danger, but I do have a really great group of friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I've really been able to like tap into the talent of the people around me to help push the festival forward. But yeah, I would encourage people to, be brave and just like start writing it down and start somewhere.
Absolutely. So, that's interesting. A year and a half. I was going to ask you that next. Like, how long did it take? Because I remember meeting you at Red Rocks, right on H Street.
I think
And
probably
when was
November of 2015.
is that when it
Yeah.
was? I was going to ask.
Yeah. I started wanting to do the festival in March of 2015. That's when the idea started brewing. And I'd never done a festival before. There's, a certain amount of ignorant bliss that made me able to do this. I really didn't know what the odds were. I didn't
Right.
know how unlikely it was. I didn't know that I was like a rolling train wreck at that point. Like if anyone with festival experience had really looked at our numbers or looked at the books, they would have been like, call this like potential fire festival of cannabis festivals off right now. Like, no, I mean, it was the first year, the fact that we got across the finish line was like a small miracle.
Well, and it almost didn't happen, right? Because you had that Kickstarter up.
I had the Indiegogo up
the
where we couldn't
Indiegogo.
make any money because, the word cannabis does not exactly get advertised on Facebook. And this is many years ago.
Right.
But yeah, no, we were like 6 digits looking for money just a month out. But like we magically like pulled everything together.
What do you think was like pushed you over that hump during that first really big hurdle? What was it that like got those funds rolling?
I mean, I couldn't, like, and I think this is a lot of what fuels my team when I say that we work scared. Like, we don't have an option to fail. None of us have backup cash. I quit my job 4 years ago and have been making like college kid cash since, but it's fine. Like, I'm happy to do it right now.
Right.
It feels worth it. So I know that we work hungry and we work really hard. And I think that, that is what got us over the initial hump. There was just not an option to fail. I think every single stone was unturned, and any cash we couldn't find, we used people skills. We negotiated every single contract. We called every single vendor that we owed money to, like for fences or toilets, and we explained to them, okay, here's our situation. This is the date when we will be able to make good on this. We can pay you X amount more right now. But it was phone calls and emails and signing new agreements and promising this and promising that, and yeah, borrowing things from people. I think, Bo Kenny from Wash Hydro, I was like, can't afford like an artist trailer. He's like, it's cool, I own an 18-wheeler. So we had this like ridiculous like rig sitting backstage, and like
Looking
our headlining
official.
artists like standing in like sort of one of these like kind of like NASCAR trailers. So there was no furniture.
Right.
It was like metal benches. It was hysterical.
Right.
But we all stood in there eating the festival catering, which was Popeyes. Because again, the details I just
love
didn't really know
Popeyes.
about. Yeah, everybody really was down and like excited about it, except for our like very pescatarian performer, Jesse Royal, who was like, I can't eat any of that. I was like, oh, no problem. We'll feed you at some point.
You can have a biscuit.
No, the first festival was all it was exciting. It was very sweet. And it we worked so hard to make it happen. It was kind of wild that it happened.
Yeah, because you get to a point, and I've been there with much smaller things, of course, but like, you talk enough shit, right? And then you're like halfway there and you're like, well, I can't turn back. There's no stopping this thing. It might not reach the finish line, but we can't stop.
Right.
You just have to double down and just hope that you can make it across the line. So you probably were sweating that first festival, huh? I mean, so I want to touch back on what you said about having to renegotiate when you were calling all these different vendors and stuff. Were they pretty open to that?
I don't even, I think it was, I couldn't tell you why they agreed to do it. I can't even figure out like how we had the balls to keep going at the time. Like it doesn't make any sense. I mean, we couldn't fail. There was no backup cash there.
Right.
The money that I raised through Indiegogo had been invested in, tents and things like that. Yeah, I don't have like a really great answer for why any of this worked out, but like, I'm really glad it did.
Well, I think I have a little insight on that. I mean, you are somebody that like immediately getting to know you and talking, not even getting to know you, just talking to you. Like you're coming from a really good place and it's really sincere and it's not arrogant and it's not a lot of these things. And I think that like, not to be cliche, but like real recognizes real. And so I think these companies took a big risk because of you, not in spite of you. You know what I mean? And I think that, yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, if there's one thing that I learned at an early age, I was in real estate finance for 13 years and I would have to like, in the 90s, and we would have to close these loans and, we'd have to get like a Bank of America to do something at 5:30 on a Friday, which they weren't even supposed to technically do. Like, it was against all odds. But if I didn't do it, this family would lose the house and they would lose the $10,000 earnest money deposit and all their shit is in a U-Haul, including their 3 children. And there's like a block from the house waiting to go to closing. And if this doesn't happen tonight, it's over. Right. And so I learned how to like get Bank of America to give me a verification and deposit at 5:30 on a Friday when the lady who answered the phone technically wasn't even like really allowed to do that. Right. And it was always just like conveying that urgency, but from like a very unselfish place. Like, no, this really matters. Like, please do this for them. And I think that that really shines through in your personality and your efforts and your intention that it's not for you. It's not this like good old boys club of like, I'm the coolest like weed person. It's like, no, I'm doing this for people that are underrepresented and like need medication and like also want to have a good time.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, I think that, it kind of goes back to that first thing that we were talking about, kind of like the pressure. Like the pressure is not just about like, oh, like I can't fail, I can't look bad. It is that exhibitor that saved up for 6 months.
You're
that person who scheduled a whole trip around like this one date. And I just don't know what I would say to any of those people if we really screwed things up. So we really try our best to like not screw things up. And so far, so good. So, you're
doing a great job. Yeah, exactly. You're doing a great job. So do you know what the numbers are on like the impact that your festival has? Do you have any like fun stats on that? Like how many people, how much money is generated? Or do you know any of those kind of things?
It's a little bit hard. I think just given the nature of the cannabis industry, the community, and just like the weirdness of the laws in DC, our exhibitors aren't necessarily like reporting back numbers.
Right.
And we do ask for tax IDs with the hopes that everybody is, filing their sales report so that the city can see that on this day, on this field, X amount of sales were done. And that means something to them.
Yeah.
We try and track like hotel rooms and things like that.
So hard, right?
Which is hard. But, I think hopefully in the next year, we will be in a position where we'll have maybe half of our exhibitors willing to report back. The one thing that, there are a couple of different ways that we can measure sort of impact, one of which is, like what kind of cash was withdrawn from ATM machines, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I always kind of wondered how they put together those stats, like how many dollars were infused into like hospitality or, like food trucks and all that stuff, so it would be cool. I think that as like legislature changes and it's not so like, taboo or flat out dangerous to talk about, what money is being made, for the vendors. I think more of that will be a little transparent for sure. But I mean, I can definitely say as somebody who's like, I feel like I'm on like all sides of the fence because like I'm a DC resident and I've been here, I grew up in Falls Church, I've been in DC 20 years now, 18 years, whatever. Right. And then I'm also an event producer. And so I get that as well. And then I'm also a vendor and I'm also, a creative. So like, I wear a lot of different hats in here. And I mean, I can honestly say that like, I love that you book Backyard Band every year.
I'm so obsessed with them and have been since I was a kid.
It's so good. And like, the booker in me wants to be like, Carol, you can't book them again. But at the same time, I'm like, book them again. It's amazing. That if you're going to throw a fucking festival, you should at least be able to book at least one act that you're like, fuck everybody, I'm booking this act. I don't care what anybody says. And I love that you do that and it's Backyard Band.
I can't help it. I like to say, I don't think that they would say this, but I like to say that they are like our official house go-go band. I would love to live in a world where like they are on stage all day and playing like between sets and just like keeping things going. But yes, they are a really important part of the music program for me personally, but also I think our attendees expect to see the Backyard Band now.
Yeah.
So like that's the National Cannabis Festival, you see the Backyard Band. And like much
Yeah.
love to like all of the other go-go
For
groups in
sure.
DC. This is just like a personal like 15-year-old girl like taking like friend's car up to Sidwell Friends to like get in line outside of the go-go in the high school gymnasium, because that's like what would happen in 1994, 1995, 1996 in DC.
Right. And I think it's important to touch on this too, because you've been quoted before as saying that, like, you're not in the music business, or like, that we're in a male dominated space, right? And that, in a lot of different arenas, from the event production and then like to music industry, but I would say that, like, you are in the music business. Like, you have produced a music festival. I mean, it's a cannabis festival as well, but it's also a music festival. Right. I mean, if it was just like, there's no giant stage like that on the mall during the 420 smoke-in, right? So, like, no disrespect or anything, but like, that's a music festival, right? What you're doing is a music festival. Yeah. You're booking artists. And I'm always really impressed that, like, you do all of that. And I don't think people fully understand. Like, they think that there's some other group or like some dude or something behind the scenes, but it's you. It's you negotiating those contracts. It's you setting the lineup from top to bottom and making that happen. And I think that's really, really impressive. And I'm sure, I know, because I've booked stages for things, and I know how incredibly annoying it is to be asked by everybody in the city if they can play your stage, especially when you've already produced the lineup and flyers for it. And you're like, let me explain time, space, and gravity to you. Like, we're full up. Schedule's already booked. And so I know how hard that is. And like, even though it can be a joy, it can also be a double-edged sword, because people get really upset about those kind of things. So I just want to say hats off to you for like sticking to your guns, because it's like Backyard Band being there every year, and it's obvious that it's not like shade to the other go-go bands. You just really fucking love Backyard,
Backyard Band,
yeah. And like, that's obvious, and I think that's awesome. And like, do you know what I mean? Like, keep doing you and keep setting the lineup. And like, you've done such a great job with all of that. Yeah, man. And don't count yourself out, because there's plenty of people out here claiming they're in the music business and they ain't done shit. Okay. So, you know what I mean?
Like to sort of like the local selection of people, it is hard. We try and keep the stage the diverse lineup of music, so that gets even harder, because it's like there's so many great like funk bands in the city. There's so many great hip hop artists in the city. There's so many great singers. But when you were talking about the future of the festival, and I got on talking about 420 week, maybe that's something. It's going to be 420 all month next year. We could be hosting shows throughout the whole month featuring past and potential festival performers of the future. Right. So I would like to get the whole city involved. I would like to show off more of the people that make great music in our city.
For sure. And I get it, because I've booked those lineups before. It's funny because Chris Naum called me the other day. He texted me. He's like, I was trying to figure out why there weren't as many bands on Funk Parade this year. And he's like, oh, because Molly Ruland doesn't have a stage, because I'm notorious for putting like 17 artists on a 5-hour lineup. And I'm like, you have 7 minutes. Go.
That's so funny.
Because I'm going from the opposite angle of being like, hey, you're a local artist. If I'm going to put you on Broccoli City stage or Funk Parade stage, it's a resume builder. Right. So you can say, I played this like event last year. So for me, if I can put 15 artists on my 6-hour stage, why wouldn't I? Right. Because it's not like, especially Funk Parade, the nature of these events, like, they're not necessarily going to be seen. Right. They're moving events. They're probably like Broccoli City was always like, we were in like the Stepchild stage location every year, right? With like very little promo from them. So it was like, if you played the local stage, you weren't necessarily playing in front of thousands of people, but you still could say that like your name is on the flyer next to Erykah Badu or whoever it is. And so he was like teasing me a little bit. He's like, oh, we're missing a few hundred bands because you're not booking a stage this year.
That's so funny.
It is. And like, there'll literally be like 3 minutes in between bands. I'm like, let's go. But it always works itself out. But I just understand like how precious that time is. Right. And like, there's only so many hours, man, and you need set changes and people want long sets. So like there's only 6 slots or something. I mean,
there's like 6 or 7 slots, and we have speakers between, which are also really important. Like, it's really cool to know that, well, on one hand, the crowd is gathering for Backyard Band. They have to hear Eleanor Holmes Norton speak, because that's what's about to happen before Backyard comes on. So there are a really limited number of slots. We have booked things that we've heard and liked. You know, I think that's how I
Totally.
found Oh He Dead. That's how I found Congo
Right.
Sanchez in year one. I was like on Instagram and just heard some things. I was like, this sounds fun. With Oh He Dead, exactly the same
Right.
thing. Um,
Shout out to booking Bo Young Prince before
yeah,
he
Bo
blew
Young
all the
Prince,
way up. Like,
amazing.
nailed it.
There have been so many amazing local performers. But, you know, we can't book everybody. We're a small show. Maybe in subsequent years, you know, maybe one day will be a 2-day festival. Maybe one day will be a multi-stage festival.
Right.
But, you know, for right now, we're
Let
just
me
having...
know. I'll book 17 bands.
That
for
sounds
you.
terrific. I'm like, we're going to have a parade and Molly is going to book 17 bands for it.
You know,
That would be amazing. But yeah, so we'll see. I would love to definitely, you know, work with you and other creatives in DC to see how we can create more performance opportunities around the festival for people.
for sure. I mean, it's such a difficult thing to book too, because it's not, you know, how do you define your cannabis consumer genre? Like, what is it? They're old, they're young, they're black, they're white, they're brown, yellow, red. They're literally like from all over the world, all over the country,
Right.
all over the tri-state, if not bigger area. There's no like, you can't make everybody happy.
We book for DC now. We don't actually book for a certain demographic. We're like, what would sound good on a stage in DC? Not, you know, which is, I don't know. It's the only way I can think to do it, because you're right. We have people from everywhere of all ages. And I feel like I have like the musical taste of like a 55-year-old. So that sort of helps us make sure that we have something for the older crowd. Toby and Khaleesi on my team definitely keep me hip to like the younger acts. So
Right.
they already have like 10 requests in my ear for next year. People we should book.
People were hitting me up to book Axie Cannabis Festival, and I was like, on behalf of Caroline, no, like, thank you, but no. But I'm like, why are people hitting me up? Like, it's just people just
Right.
like anything they can do to get in, right? Like, it's but that just shows you that you're doing a great job. You know what I mean? That's just evidence that like people know about the festival.
I
and they
wish we had a
wanna be part
longer
of it.
day. I'm like, hint, hint, events DC. It would be awesome if we could go till 10. But if we had a longer day, then, you know, that's like 2 or 3 more acts.
100%.
So maybe one day, someday.
Well, and you know, maybe that 2-day festival.
Whew.
I know you stress out. I can
Well,
see
it's
you
funny.
like glaze.
I start to like panic a little bit, but I think the same thing. If you talk to my sponsors and exhibitors, half of them will be like, heck yeah. The other half like get pale and are like, I don't know if I could do 2 days of that. That's like a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but you know, maybe that's an opportunity to like have different, like, you
People
know,
switch in
that
and
could
out,
be a
yeah.
whole nother thing, right? So
We can have a whole nother show about how we can switch in and out the exhibitors overnight at a 2-day cannabis festival.
totally. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, I'm already like super pumped about next year. Like, I'm more excited about the next year than I ever have before.
Oh,
Like I
thank
said, I
you.
think I finally figured it out with vending, and like we just had such a great day. Like, I was so busy that day that I didn't even realize that I could see the stage from my booth until Ludacris was on stage.
That's really.
And then
could
I
you
was
hear
like,
it
oh
from
my
your
God,
booth?
you can see the stage from right
And
here.
could you hear from your booth?
No, not until Ludacris came on.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then I was like, oh my God, the stage is right there. And then I was like, Jesus, that's how busy I was all day that I didn't even have time to look to the right to notice
That's wild.
that this stage was there. And I mean, it was such good vibes, like being next
Yeah.
to like Juan Deuce and Ratchet
love
Cakes
them.
and like, you know,
I mean, it's interesting. The whole thing is like one intense algorithm of enjoyment for our attendees. Like, how many exhibitors is the right number so that you guys have a great day, but our attendees have a lot of variety? How many food trucks? Like, how many people are going to get back in line for that? So it's all trying to figure out the right numbers. And I think that my team did a really good job this year of figuring out how many like programs we should have on site, how many activities,
right.
because you can't just walk into an event and it's like there is the music, the food trucks, or the vendors. There has to be stuff to do. So I was happy with some of the enhancements this year. The one that we didn't get to make that I was dying to do, which I now realize is a really bad idea. I really wanted to have a petting zoo, but the potential for like farm animals to be given like cannabis
Yeah.
products would be just like, can you imagine?
Oh yeah, I can.
It would probably not end well.
It would make for like a great cartoon movie reenactment, but not like in real life, you know?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
a Rick and Morty
I just
episode or
wanted
something.
like
you know?
small farm animals in a pen. I thought that would be so great.
Goat yoga in the
Yes.
left
Oh,
field.
wait a second now. That's a really great idea. Goat yoga at the festival, and they would trim the grass all day.
What?
Could be a thing. And probably eat some of the trash, which would be great.
Right?
Yeah.
Man, what a nightmare of a logistic all that is. So, and the one really cool thing is, I love that you're in, DC, and that you're at RFK. You've been quoted as saying RFK is like the middle center of your universe, and I couldn't agree more. I've been in Trinidad for 17 years now, and I just really have an affinity for like Kingman Park, and
Yeah.
what that means, first black affluent neighborhood in the country. And, it just really matters. And I think that it's really cool that you do the festival there. And I think one of my favorite parts is like seeing people peering over the fences and the neighbors on their stoop, and everyone's really happy.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really awesome, because I don't think that that's always the case, It's hard not to disrupt a neighborhood when 20,000 people show up.
Right.
And I mean, I can say, like, leaving the event that night, there wasn't like any trash on the streets. Now, there was trash inside the festival grounds, of course. That's what happens when 20,000
Right.
people hang out. But it didn't spill over. It didn't look like a war zone outside of the fences.
No, people are super respectful. Like, we have no complaints from the neighborhood.
What would they complain about, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's Airbnb is popping. Probably some of the neighbors are selling water.
Well, and our attendees kindly pull up all of our street signs for us and take them home on their way back to the metro. So, like, there's no directional signage left after the festival, because we do the things that say, like, we'd like you to walk this way. And so I can see how that would be fun on someone's, like, I don't know, rec room wall or something like that. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that the community has embraced the festival, and we're really lucky. That's true. I mean, we're not like near the community. We are on Oklahoma Avenue, across the street from people's houses.
Like literally.
Like literally standing on their front porch, listening to Ludacris while he like waves at them and acknowledges them.
Which is awesome.
But yeah, and I love, I remember the first year we had neighbors get up against a fence line, and the police seemed to suddenly be like, maybe that's not good. And it was like, leave it alone. So in the second year, it was like, maybe you all should be getting a higher fence line. It was like, no, it's fine. I'm like, no, that's like I want the neighborhood to be able to enjoy this show. And again, it would like defeat the idea of creating an event accessible to our community if we were building, walls are very popular nowadays, I hear. So we're not trying to build any higher walls around our event. But, I hope that we can be at RFK forever. I hope that they have a lot of new stuff happening over there, a lot of construction going on.
That's right.
And I hope that Events DC and the DC Council are remembering the city's creatives as they continue this construction, and ensure that there is appropriate property over there for us to continue to have outdoor events.
For sure.
Farmers markets, festivals, carnivals,
Everything.
all of that stuff. Because there's really nowhere else in the city.
There really isn't. And there's 7 miles of parking lot at RFK, so it's got a lot of potential for sure.
Yeah.
And then speaking of which, I love that you have found like a big ass patch of grass to do this thing on, and it's not on that hard concrete, because that is really unforgiving for sure. For sure. And the last thing I want to talk about is, you talk about the barrier for entry and being for the community. And I mean, I've been telling you for years to raise your ticket prices, and you refuse to. And I think that I just want to acknowledge that. Like, I think it's really awesome. I know that like it's so much work, and you could charge so much more, and you don't, and you're really adamant about that. And I really, really respect that, because DC has changed so much, and everything is becoming like for other people, not us. And it's like, and I say us as a collective of Washingtonians, native or not, but the people that have been here and invested in this city. I mean, when the economy tanked and the recession hit, everything in DC got $4 more expensive. Right. Jameson used to be $7, $6, $8, and then it was $12. Right. And that happened overnight. Like the food got more expensive, alcohol got more expensive. And I feel like that really like kind of buoyed the local economy for a long time. It was off the backs of the people that were here, getting to work, working service jobs, being on their feet, and like just working really hard. Right. And now we've just really evolved into this thing where $12 is the norm, and they're going to serve it to you with an attitude, and you're just like, when did this happen? And like, how come I can't afford to go to these things? So I always appreciate people that are doing like community events and like block parties, like anything that is like, doesn't have a barrier to entry at all. Right. And I think that like with the way your festival is put together and what you're offering, like I don't even know how you can do it for such a low ticket price. I appreciate that you do pre-sales for so long. I mean, people can really get the cheapest ticket ever to this thing if they plan ahead.
Yeah.
And I think that really speaks volumes about like who you are and like what you're really made of and what you're trying to do, because you could easily like do pre-sales and then double the cost of your ticket, and like people would still come and they might talk shit and be mad, but they would still come and
Right.
you would get paid. And like, but that's not you. Like that is not you at all. And you know, you're just not built that way. And I want more people to know that about you. I want
Oh,
more
thank
people to
you.
know that like you are giving this from like the best place ever and taking so many risks and not for personal benefit.
No, I appreciate that. You know, the dream one day is that cannabis is federally legal and this show moves to the National Mall and it's open to the public with no city like ticket fee. That's like what we want to do,
Right.
because you can't charge a ticket fee on the National Mall.
Right.
You know, for right now, we have what we have with the city, and we have figured out ways to be able to keep that base ticket price. And like, I hope people do pay attention when that goes on sale this year, because we we put those there with the intention of people buying those tickets. We want people to take advantage of the low price ticket. You know, we're really trying to not let our ticket prices creep up at all. And I think that we'll be able to maintain that like original base ticket price going forward. And yeah, I definitely understand the idea, or just like the feeling of not being able to afford to be part of the events in our own city. It's asking a lot of money, you know, with some of the larger events that happen. And my dad has always been really funny about these kinds of things. He like has an apartment in the city that he rents out, and he could rent it for like a lot more money, but he's just like, you know, I would rather have people who are grateful to be in the space and happy because they know it's like a good place to be and create a loyal tenant than have people who are always like looking for more from the experience because, you know, you charged me an arm and a leg to come through this door. I need marble on the floor of this apartment.
Right. I
You
have
know,
very high expectations.
yeah. And I mean, it's not us that makes like NCF great. We set up like a fence line and the stage and we put amazing bands on there. But, you know, it's like the people like you coming, you had a full day cipher. You know, we have
10 hours. That was bananas.
it's ridiculous. Yeah. We have people that bring really cool ideas to the festival. There were like body painters there. There are people doing live art, and that's what makes it exciting. So I think that if we were just to charge more because we can charge more, it would change the kind of people coming to the event, and it would change the experience for everybody. Um, so no, we like doing it this way. We like having like as many people as can afford to attend, and this was all designed with the idea that if you hear about the festival 3 months out, you can put away that like $10 or $15 a month and get your ticket.
Exactly. It's very, very affordable. So I have one last question for you. What is the like full impact, like in your mind's eye, like it's a year, 5, 10, 15 from now, whatever, right? Like, and the festival is doing the best it possibly can. Like, what is the ultimate impact that you want to have with the National Cannabis Festival?
I have this theory that has not been proved true by anyone, but I want it to be proved true by like me and other people. I think that we're moving into a different time and space with entertainment. And I hope that in 5 or 10 years, there are a lot more issue related events that you're not just attending, you know, to see and be seen. It's like by showing up, I am standing with this. And I think a lot of, you know, you were talking about Broccoli City earlier. You know, that event was started around like, you know, community access to nutrition, educating people about it. So DC has like a unique environment for that. I know that All Things Go last year made a shift to be more women focused and LGBTQ focused, because I think that they recognize also that there's a need for people to feel represented. And I know that in a lot of the work that you do, like it's so driven by creating spaces for people to feel represented. And I do feel like that's going to be, especially in these interesting political times that we're living in, I think that we're going to see a lot more issue-based large events. And for that reason, I hope National Cannabis Festival is around for a while, because even after cannabis legalization, the issue is not fixed. There's still
Right.
people in jail. There's still people who can't be part of the industry. And I also hope that we have like a real surge in events that have like a real purpose. And I'm not saying that there are real, events right now that don't have purpose in our city, but that are not just about the event, but about really amplifying the needs, the ideas, the culture of a community, because DC is unique in that way. We are such a mixing bowl, and there's so many smart people doing smart things here that are activist related, and we can take advantage of that.
Most definitely. That's awesome. So, before we close out, can you tell people a couple different things, like where they can find you, if they want to hire High Street PR to like organize any events or anything throughout the year, how they can reach you, and if they would like to be a part of the festival or volunteer or whatever, how they can do that as well.
So I can be reached at Caroline at nationalcannabisfestival.com. That is the best place to contact me about event needs, or if you want to get involved with the festival next year. And let's see, you can reach me on Instagram at Caroline NDA City or at National NATL Cannabis Fest. That's probably much more interesting than my personal Instagram. We're also on Facebook and we're on Twitter. And I personally am on Facebook, but not Twitter. So check out the festival accounts. We're coming back April 18th next year. Our summit will be on the 17th, most likely. And we're looking forward to another great year in our city.
That's awesome. Well, Caroline, thank you so much for coming to sit with me today. It's always so nice to see you. And we'll wrap this up, and we'll update everybody with where they can find the content, and we'll let you know when it's coming out.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Fun.